Hey there, so today we're going to be talking about the city that I currently live in, Roanoke, Virginia. Roanoke, Virginia is in southwest Virginia, um, near the border of West Virginia and Tennessee, and North Carolina, actually. Um, Roanoke, Virginia is a little big city, as I like to call it, but we have a lot of diverse areas. So, the area that I want to focus on today is the central area um, where I live. So the area that I live in is a little bit more rural. Houses have backyards. People have farms and crops in some areas, anyway. Um, in my little, locality, there isn't much as far as big buildings. There is one factory down the street, and that is the tallest thing around for quite a while. But, in Roanoke, you can pretty much get anywhere within 15 or 20 minutes edge to edge, the way that our roads are set up here. So, not far away, you've got a big populated city. Um, and it's got activities to do, and so it's obviously a little more populated. There's restaurants and bars. People work downtown. There are always new stores and restaurants opening up. Always new apartments getting built, that sort of thing. So just something to keep in mind, give you an idea of, what this town sort of looks like. So the first thing that I wanted to focus on when I looked at the website was the air quality. It was right there at the top, and I had never considered that maybe the air quality in Roanoke, Virginia, of all places, may not be up to standard. So I'm kind of glad that I was able to look this up. Turns out it's all is well. It looks like as recently as 2015 anyway, the air quality has been good or moderate. It's never gone below moderate, which is unsurprising. I think just the way that this area is and how it's built, and sort of what sort of businesses are around here. The current and expected forecast are both good for the time being. I know that the most recent data they've collected on this is 2015, but it looks like they're keeping an up-to-date tab sort of on the current timeline, even if they haven't collected enough data to make a chart yet. So that is all good news, and pretty unsurprising. Water quality was the next focus. So this one did and didn't surprise me, just because I think of any public waterway, it's got to be dirty from something, right? It's you're hard pressed to find natural water that isn't polluted some way when you live in a place that has people and neighborhoods and cities and businesses and buildings. So for Roanoke, there were too many areas of impairment to cover each individually, so I picked the most relevant one, which is a 4-mile stretch of the Roanoke River. I was very surprised at how impaired the water quality was. And when I explored the page a little deeper, I got some more details. So, the aquatic life, it looks like is infected with some kind of unacceptable macroinvertebrate. There's mercury and PCBs in the fish tissue, and the PCBs you can see spelled out there is the polychlorinated biphenyls. That is a mouthful. And then as far as swimming in it, there is E. coli in the water that you can actually contract yourself. And even the wildlife living in and around the water, so I'm assuming that means something other than fish, maybe insects or frogs or something like semi-aquatic, also affected by PCBs. The thing I want to focus on the most here is I was shocked to see this because water play is a really big culture in Roanoke. As soon as it's warm outside, everybody is floating the river. People make businesses out of it, driving from one end to the other. They put a cooler in the river, they drink beer, they sit on a float and float for miles and miles and miles, burning in the sun. So not only are they putting their bodies in this river that has E. coli, they're also drinking and consuming things orally while in this river. Um, I don't know a lot of people who fish in that river, to be fair. I don't think anybody would eat anything that came out of that river. It's just not something um, that in that particular area is a popular thing to do. But that waterway is connected to other waterways where people may fish, and um, it's something to consider if you're considering consuming fish from that particular basin. So the water quality was surprising, but a little more surprising was that there's apparently like a decently high percentage of formaldehyde risk, which is considered a carcinogen, so we're focusing on cancer risk here. But there's other carcinogens and methods of exposure that are documented as being prevalent in Roanoke City, Virginia. But then it does go into formaldehyde, benzene, carbon tetrachloride, and acetaldehyde. acetaldehyde. So there is inhalation exposure for all of these things. So factories putting off emissions, that sort of thing. This is all cancer-specific things that you may inhale, and what percentage of that thing is most prevalent. This one really surprised me. Low birth weight and infant mortality. We are doing worse in Roanoke, Virginia than the rest of the state of Virginia or the United States in general. For both low birth weight and infant mortality. This is also a topic where you can focus on sort of exploring racial inequities and how that could be playing a role in my community. You can see how in the chart on the right, infant mortality, how it separates white from non-white. And there is a significant difference in just Roanoke City alone between white and non-white families experiencing infant loss, infant mortality. It is, per 1,000 live births. So we're only looking at, 5 for white and 20 for non-white, which I don't mean to say only. That's significant loss. And each individual loss is significant, certainly for that family. But what I mean to say is it looks like in general the percentage is low for Virginia, Roanoke, and on a national scale. But when you really look at it spread out on this chart, it does shock you that, this particular city, which is, a well-developed city with a great big hospital system right in the middle of it, it is surprising to see that it's doing worse on average. The last category I wanted to explore were just the energy sources and what the implications of that would be. So this basically goes over state versus U.S. So this is just Virginia. This isn't Roanoke. There wasn't data more specific to Roanoke, but I thought it was still important because there are important implications when you think of energy sources. And I remember learning to ask these questions in nursing school sometimes too. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. So we'll start with coal. So you can see the state's production in Virginia is a little bit more than the U.S. average production. That's not surprising. Coal in this area is very unsurprising, actually. Then we have natural gas. We actually use a lot less natural gas than the rest of the United States. No crude oil. Some nuclear energy. I truly don't know if this means nuclear in sort of a militant sense, or if there are other energy sources that are considered nuclear that are not some kind of military fortress. But we do have several large military bases, and it may sound silly to say, but if on my mind is what if what I'm thinking is correct here, nuclear energy would be a little more increased in our state just because of the high military presence. And then renewable energy, like solar energy. The reason that this is important, and this brought my mind back to nursing school, is the way people use energy really can impact their health. Specifically, I'm thinking of a wood stove. How people heat their house can have lifelong impact on their health as far as lung disease, and then all the other cascading diseases that would come behind having polluted air in your home all the time, especially for people who don't leave their home and they're, sedentary. So, that's just something to consider, when you live in a cold area and you live in an area that does use an alternative kind of energy to what we might think of when we think of, using energy on an individual scale. Now, of course, if you're looking at an entire city, the importance of that is mapping out, is there any disparity in the areas where people are typically using those wood-burning stoves, for example, and people who live in the city and have central heating. So that's the kind of implication that an energy source can have on, a state all the way down to a small community. And here are my references. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week.